From Silicon Slopes, I'm your host, Josh Matches, and I'm joined by Sunny Sanyal, the CEO of Varex. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Glad to be here.
For our friends who might not know, talk to us a little bit about Varex and what you guys do.
Yeah. Varex Imaging is the world's largest supplier of X-ray-based components for imaging. Imaging that is used for both medical imaging and industrial imaging. And these are technologies that you would normally see if you go get a radiology exam done, right? So a CT scanner or your surgical C-arm or a mammography system. We provide the guts of those systems, the components that get engineered in and designed into those systems. We're a Salt Lake-based company. We've been here for the last 65 years, and we have a very large global footprint. About 70% of our business comes from outside the US. More than 80% of our businesses as a result of relationships that are outside the US. So in short, if you're in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of anywhere in the world and having a procedure done, and there's an imaging machine that's taking pictures of you, if you open it up, there's better than a 50% chance that one of the mission critical components in there are made by us right here in Salt Lake City.
Wow, that's fascinating and so exciting. What are some of the advances in imaging? Certainly, both medical but industrial. Would love to kind of hear over the past few years what's evolved.
Yeah, so imaging technologies have come a long ways. First and foremost, Varex has been known as the company who's the innovator in this space that is known for a number of the firsts in imaging technologies. And what we bring to market is looked at very closely by the medical imaging manufacturers, because very often our innovations shape the way these imaging applications are built and developed. So for example, in the late 1990s, we brought forward technologies for X-ray sources that were half the size of what was conventionally available there, twice the power. They could run nonstop all day, and that stirred up an entire generation of applications called your multi-slice CTs. So Varex is very well known as a company that innovated immensely in the CT space that allowed the industry to bring these very sophisticated CT scanners to market. And then after that, we brought digital X-ray detectors to market. These were used in place of film. And that completely changed the landscape, how imaging applications were developed and designed. And now, because of the digital technologies, the digital data, you can use software, artificial intelligence to do much better job of imaging, high resolution imaging, high speed imaging, with software that allows for automated detection of artifacts. So this is an example of the types of technologies that we have brought to market. And increasingly, we've taken those technology also into the industrial space.
Yes.
So that the same imaging applications, although packaged differently, designed slightly differently, can be used to scan, let's say, food for safety, to make sure that there are no contaminants in baby food, there are no foreign particles that shouldn't be there, or they're used for in everyday applications in the automotive space, in the aerospace, to make sure all the parts, pieces, components are being designed to specs, being manufactured to specs, and are of high quality. And increasingly, because of our innovation in the way these components perform, the detectors are getting much faster. They are able to image with much higher resolution. The number of applications that can be designed, that can be conceived of at this time, are just exploding. So we're very excited about the fact that there's a whole greenfield market ahead of us in the industrial imaging space. We address very large market footprint in these spaces, and combined with software, the technology has a tremendous potential.
And how did the pandemic affect your business? I mean, certainly there was such an increase in need for many of the medical devices, but I'm sure on the industrial side as well.
Yeah, so the pandemic was very close to home for us. And what I mean by that is it affected the way people receive healthcare. So during the pandemic, a lot of elective procedures just came to a grinding halt. People stopped going to their doctor's offices, mammography exams slowed down, people stopped visiting dentists. So we did see a significant slowdown in our business during the pandemic. Our business top line dropped by about 15% during this time. But the one thing that we do know in our space is that the demand is permanent, in the sense that it's only the end market, end user demand is driven by population growth and aging of population. And X-ray based diagnostic imaging is one of the most versatile ways of imaging and diagnosing patients for different disease states. So we knew demand was going to come back, and it did come back. It came back with a bang, and we're seeing that we're back to growth mode and back to greater than pre-pandemic levels. So
Incredible.
It's good to see all that demand come back, growth come back, and now we find ourselves in a world where we're supply constrained, still partly because of COVID, but hopefully the supply chain issues will be resolved.
I know, we
in the near
keep talking
future.
about these supply chain issues. Hopefully they do get solved.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the future of Varex. Where are things going, and where do you see the kind of imaging industry moving towards in perhaps the next 5 years?
Yeah, so our mission is to make the invisible visible, in a nutshell. And so all our focus of R&D and innovation is focused on making that better and more efficient. More efficient in the sense that that you could make it safer for the patient, make it faster for the clinicians. So we are focused on the next generation of imaging technologies that would dramatically reduce the dose delivered to a patient. So imagine if you could do the same X-ray, the same scan, same CT scan at about 70% lower dose. That makes a dramatic difference in safety and the ability of these technologies to be used more broadly. We are introducing a technology called photon counting, which we have announced externally, and these technologies are already available by us in different applications. But our goal is to get into photon counting in a big way and use the technology to make a sea change difference in the way medical imaging applications are designed for.
So what is photon counting?
Think of photon counting as a technology that eliminates noise in the image. So this is like, I correlate this to AM radio versus FM radio. AM radio was susceptible to noise, and you'd get crackling in the sound, right? FM changed the way the signals are transmitted, and it completely eliminated the effect of noise by just counting the number of changes in the frequency changes. Similarly, in photon counting, we count every X-ray photon and we put them in different energy buckets, and essentially we eliminate the effect of noise. That means these are very, very highly sensitive detectors that can image at very high speeds with very little dose. And so that's what enables new applications. So if you had to, for example, do imaging in an industrial setting at the speed of production, so you might have boxes of ramen noodles going down an assembly line. How can you image those as fast as they're being produced without slowing down the whole process? With these kinds of technologies that can image at the speed of, let's say, 4,000 frames a second, you can generate very nice images that are very good for diagnostic purposes with very low dose and high speeds. So that's what photon counting technology brings to bear. So this is an example of some of the things we're doing in terms of new technologies, new cutting edge technologies that can be a game changer in the imaging space. In addition to that, we're going back and looking at ways to redefine how some of the current technologies work. And there are a number of products that we're introducing, that we have introduced and are in the pipeline that do that.
Well, we look forward to hearing more about those. I mean, this world of imaging is so exciting just to think about all the ways that it affects our lives.
Yeah. As a company, our employees love the fact that everything we do touches people's lives. A small change that we make to our product that changes the way a patient experiences how imaging procedures are performed touches the lives of millions of patients every single day. And that's what drives us, that's what motivates us. I mean, a story that comes to my mind is I was in the office one weekend, and my philosophy is, if the door's open, if the lights are on, just come right in. There's no need to make an appointment, and people take me up on that. Our employees do. So this employee walked into the door and he said, look, I've been working here for 25 years and love doing what I'm doing. I build X-ray tubes, and a few months ago I went and had a procedure done, and they said that they found something and they needed me to go in and get a CT scan done. So I was just scared to death, terrified about. I mean, it was the worst feeling you have, not knowing what's wrong with you, and they might find something that might be terrible. And I said, until it took a few weeks to get an appointment, until then I was just a wreck. And then once I came in for the procedure, I lay down on the table and I looked up and I saw this was a CT system that uses one of the tubes that I make. I said, there was a sense of calmness that came about me immediately, knowing that if there's anything that needs to be found, that tube will be the reason why we will find it. He said, that's the day I realized the value, exactly what I do and what a difference it makes to people and people's lives. And this is how we see ourselves. This is how we perceive our responsibility in the imaging space. And that's what drives and motivates our employees.
Amazing story. Sunny, thank you so much for joining us here at Silicon Slopes. And we look forward to having you back next year to hear more of Varex's incredible developments.
My pleasure. And I'll tell you more about what we're doing with photon counting and other cool technologies then.
Can't wait. Thanks very much.
Thanks.